Assalamu alaikum everybody on YouTube. What gave me the idea for this video was rereading this article. I read it like a year ago maybe. Well, maybe in the spring, early spring. And the article was I hugged a queer Muslim. And then I also happened to hear, it was probably the same day or something, this interview. Krista Tippett was interviewing kind of a spiritual leader within the Catholic tradition. His name's Jean Vanier, and he heads this community called L'Arche, which are kind of like caretakers to people with mental, for lack of a better term, disabilities like Down syndrome and things like that. And he was talking about his inspiration for that, like what brought him into that ministry. And it's actually very moving to listen to him talk about this, because he said when he first met people with these mental, again, for lack of a better term, disabilities, he said what he saw were people that had suffered pain, suffered loneliness, or some sort of alienation from their family, or people that were supposed to love them. They're basically the outcasts of society. All they wanted to have was that love. And he compared it to his own religious tradition. He said, what I basically saw were people asking Jesus's question in the Gospels, "Do you love me?" And that was really moving. Like, I teared up when I heard that, because that's what the question is. It's a divine question, isn't it? It's God asking through people to other people, "Do you love me?" If God is expressed through this creation, do you still love this creation? And it's a test. Like, what really helped me come to terms with my sexuality and as a religious person was to view myself as a unique individual, and that uniqueness is kind of a witness to the diversity of God's creation, right? That's one way that I've reconciled it, because as a person who's different in that way, that tests people's boundaries of love, their ability to make friendships, and to understand me. And there's this writer, Andrew Solomon. I think he's a psychologist too, I don't really remember. But he wrote 2 books, one on depression and one on just this issue, actually, of love unconditional. There's this book I recently got, Far From the Tree, and it's all about what's the amount of difference that challenges a parent's love. And so throughout this book he talks about differences that these parents have to grapple with their kids. For example, dwarfism, or deafness, or sexuality, sexual orientation. And it's really mind-opening. One of my friends worded it this way: this is where the LGBT discussion is going. It is highlighting that eternal truth of unconditional love. Ultimately, we would hope that our parents will love us no matter what, right? That our communities would love us no matter what. Andrew Solomon talks about studying deaf culture for an article he did for New York Times. And he says, my assumption about deafness was that it was a deficit and nothing more. It was a disability, Over the months that followed, I found myself drawn into the deaf world. Most deaf children are born to hearing parents, and those parents frequently prioritize functioning in the hearing world, expending enormous energy on oral speech and lip reading. Doing so, they can neglect other areas of their children's education. While some deaf people are good at lip reading and produce comprehensible speech, act straight, are you seeing the comparison here? Many do not have that skill, and years go by as they sit endlessly with audiologists and speech pathologists instead of learning history and mathematics and philosophy. Many stumble upon deaf identity in adolescence, and it comes as a great liberation. They move into a world that validates sign as a language and discover themselves. Some hearing parents accept this powerful development, others struggle against it. And then he goes on, he says, the whole situation felt arrestingly familiar to me because I am gay. Gay people usually grow up under the purview of straight parents who feel that their children would be better off straight and sometimes torment them by pressing them to conform. Those gay people often discover gay identity in adolescence or afterward, finding great relief there. When I started writing about the deaf, the cochlear implant, which can provide more facsimile of hearing, was a recent innovation. And it had been hailed by its progenitors as a miraculous cure for a terrible defect. It was deplored by the deaf community as a genocidal attack on a vibrant community. Both sides have since moderated their rhetoric, turned it down. Nobody's trying to do a genocide on anybody here. But the issue is complicated by the fact that cochlear implants are most effective when they are surgically implanted early, in infants, ideally. So the decision is often made by parents, not the kids. And watching the debate, I knew that my own parents would gamely have consented to a parallel early procedure to ensure that I would be straight, had one existed. And that's the interesting aspect. Would you change your kid to be more normal? And it's a terrible way of viewing it. And Elder Solomon kind of goes on, and he's kind of like, these differences are actually what connects us. That difference is the normal thing, and being normal is kind of the oddball thing, and we all pretend we're normal, to help society function, I guess. I don't really know. But, it's these differences that challenge love in our societies. And I think that it's a very spiritual question, at least for me as a religious person. And coming from a Muslim background, I'm making all these connections. I'm like, whoa, this hadith